This is what daily life for an enslaved person in Virginia was like. Ever wonder what life was truly like for enslaved people in Virginia? Let's uncover these hidden lives and discover the strength and resilience of enslaved Virginians. Number 1. Diverse labor beyond the fields. While we often picture enslaved people working in vast fields of cotton or tobacco in Virginia, the reality was much more diverse, especially after the transatlantic slave trade ended in 1808. Yes, plantations remained a major site of forced labor up until emancipation in 1865. However, the skills and strength of enslaved individuals were exploited in a wide array of industries beyond agriculture. Think about the bustling activity of a port city. You might find enslaved people working in the shipyards, unloading cargo, or processing fish in the fishery. Further inland, some were put to work in factories producing goods or toiling in tobacco processing plants. Others were involved in transporting agricultural products to markets, acting as the engine of commerce. Beyond these more visible roles, enslaved people were also essential in skilled crafts and trades. Many became proficient in barrel making, crucial for storing and shipping goods. Others learned the intricate process of tanning hides to create leather. Some were tasked with making everyday necessities like candles and soap, and the list goes on. Carpentry, shoemaking, also called cobbling, preserving and packing meat and fish. These were just some of the skills forced upon enslaved people, demonstrating their adaptability and resilience in the face of brutal oppression. So while the image of toiling in fields is a powerful one, it's crucial to remember that the labor of enslaved Virginians extended far beyond agriculture. They were integral to various industries and trades, contributing significantly to the economy while receiving no benefit or recognition for their immense skill and hard work. Number 2, plantation economy and the hiring out system. The large plantations that dotted the Virginia landscape often aimed for self-sufficiency. They produced a wide range of goods, striving to provide everything needed to sustain the plantation community. However, smaller farms often couldn't afford to keep enslaved people year-round. This led to the development of a hiring out system. Essentially, larger plantations would rent out enslaved individuals to these smaller farms during peak seasons like planting and harvest. Payment for these forced services varied, sometimes involving cash but also often including crops as part of the agreement. This system meant that the daily lives of enslaved Virginians could differ greatly depending on the time of year and the specific circumstances. Their experiences were constantly shaped by the demands of the agricultural calendar and, most importantly, the whims of their enslavers who held absolute power over their lives. Enslaved people as economic engines. Enslaved people weren't just vital to individual farms. They were the backbone of Virginia's entire economy. In the antebellum South, wealth and social standing went hand in hand, a pattern established in the colonial period. Wealth was measured in property, including both land and, tragically, enslaved people. For the wealthiest Virginians, the sheer number of people they enslaved represented a significant portion of their overall wealth. Interestingly, even the largest landowners, particularly those in the Tidewater region and along the Blue Ridge Mountains, often faced cash shortages. To generate income, they turned to the forced labor of enslaved people, not always by selling them, but by hiring them out. Enslaved individuals were assigned to a wide range of tasks beyond agricultural work. Some were put to work in tobacco warehouses, the hubs of a major cash crop. Others toiled loading and unloading ships along the busy wharves of the James and Rappahannock rivers, ensuring the smooth flow of trade. As railroads began to emerge, enslaved people were forced to build the very infrastructure that would facilitate commerce and travel. They prepared the roadbeds and laid the tracks, performing dangerous and back-breaking labor. Even the construction of Richmond, the new state capital, relied on the exploitation of enslaved people hired out as both skilled and unskilled laborers. The wages earned by these individuals went directly to their enslavers. In rare cases, enslavers might allow them to keep a small portion of their earnings, but more often than not, they were denied any share of the fruits of their labor. This system highlighted the deep injustice at the heart of the plantation economy, their skills and hard work exploited for the benefit of others. Number 3. Urban slavery and the rise of self-hire. While slavery is often associated with rural plantations, it was also a significant presence in urban centers like Richmond, Virginia. As the city grew, so did its industries, particularly tobacco processing and iron production. Enslaved people were forced to work in these burgeoning industries, including the Tredegar Iron Works, which became a major supplier of Confederate munitions during the Civil War. However, urban slavery differed from its rural counterpart in some ways. Relatively few city merchants and businessmen owned large numbers of enslaved people. This wasn't necessarily due to moral objections, but rather practical limitations. They simply lacked the space to house them in the crowded urban environment. Instead, they relied on hiring enslaved people from nearby plantations. This led to a unique phenomenon, some of the earliest examples of commuting in American history. Many enslaved individuals would travel into the city each day for work and then return to their plantations at night. To avoid being mistaken for runaways, they were required to carry passes authorizing their movements, constantly under the watchful eye of slave patrols who policed the streets. Self-hire, a glimmer of agency. Within this system of urban slavery emerged a practice known as self-hire. Enslaved people with valuable skills like blacksmithing or carpentry could negotiate arrangements where they were essentially hired out to various employers. They would pay a portion of their earnings to their enslavers and keep the rest. This meant they were responsible for their own living expenses, finding lodging, and securing a steady stream of work while still under the control of their enslavers. Offered a degree of autonomy and freedom that was unimaginable for those on rural plantations. Self-hire allowed enslaved individuals increased access to the wider community, both black and white. They interacted with a broader range of people, built networks, and gained valuable experience navigating the urban landscape, restrictions, and resistance. However, the growing number of self-hired enslaved people in cities like Richmond led to anxieties among white authorities. They feared the potential for unrest and resistance. In response, Virginia enacted laws to restrict the movement of enslaved people and imposed curfews, limiting their presence on the streets after dark. Despite these restrictions, self-hire provided a pathway to freedom for some. By carefully managing their earnings, some enslaved individuals were able to save enough money to purchase their own freedom and that of their loved ones. By the 1840s, it was not uncommon to find enslaved women working as domestic servants in urban households while their husbands worked as self-hired laborers nearby. This arrangement offered a glimmer of hope within the brutal system of slavery, demonstrating the resilience and determination of enslaved people to carve out spaces of autonomy and build a better future for themselves and their families. What aspect of enslaved Virginian lives surprised you the most? Did anything challenge your previous understanding of slavery in America? Number 4. The social hierarchy within enslaved communities. Even within the horrific system of slavery, enslaved people formed their own complex social structures, particularly on the larger plantations, where labor was divided into a variety of roles. The privileged few, house servants, sat at the top of this hierarchy. These were the enslaved individuals who worked within the main house. The butler, sometimes called the major domo, held a position of authority, at least officially, overseeing other house servants. However, it was often the enslaved woman assigned to care for the enslaver's children, acting as a nanny, nurse, and disciplinarian who wielded the most influence. This figure, later stereotyped as the mammy in popular culture, often held a powerful position within the household. Though it's important to remember, that this power existed within the confines of slavery. Other house servants, such as waiters, maids, cooks, and personal attendants, occupied a rung below the butler and the children's caregiver, but they still held a higher social standing than those who labored outside. Many house servants lived in quarters within the main house, often in the cellar or an adjacent building, rather than in the communal slave quarters, further setting them apart. Skilled labor, stable workers, and artisans. Another privileged group were those who worked in the stables. Virginians took great pride in their horses and carriages, and maintaining them required specialized skills. Enslaved blacksmiths, farriers who cared for horses' hooves, grooms, coachmen, and other stable workers held positions of responsibility and expertise. On larger plantations, the riding stables and those for workhorses were often separate, and the enslaved people working in the riding stables enjoyed a higher status. Their proximity to the enslaver, caring for his prized horses and ensuring his comfortable travel, gave them a degree of influence. Many stable workers were even allowed to sleep in the stables rather than the slave quarters, a privilege granted at the enslaver's discretion. Skilled artisans, such as carpenters, blacksmiths, and coopers, barrel makers, also held a relatively higher social standing. As the structure of Virginia plantations evolved in the late 18th century, a shift occurred in housing arrangements. While enslaved people had previously lived in communal buildings or dormitories, individual cabins, though often crude and basic, began to appear. Artisans and house servants typically occupied the cabins closest to the main house or their work areas. Field hands, on the other hand, were housed further away, often near the specific fields where they labored. This physical separation reflected and reinforced the social hierarchy within the enslaved community. It's crucial to remember that even those who held higher positions within this hierarchy were still enslaved. They faced the constant threat of violence, exploitation, and the denial of their basic human rights. Number 5. Life in the slave quarters. Work, food, and resistance. Life for enslaved people in Virginia was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also varied and complex, especially on larger plantations. Plantations like Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, which spanned nearly 8 square miles, were often divided into separate farms, each with its own overseer. George Washington's Mount Vernon, for example, consisted of 5 distinct farms. This meant that slave quarters weren't always clustered in a single location, as often depicted. Instead, they were scattered across the plantation, often far from the main house and the watchful eyes of the enslavers. Artisans, such as those working in workshops, mills, or distilleries, typically lived near their workplaces. Incentives and earnings, challenging the myths. Contrary to a common misconception, enslaved people in Virginia were sometimes given financial incentives to increase their productivity. Plantation owners like Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and Lee recognized that offering small rewards could boost output. Archaeological excavations at sites like Monticello and Mount Vernon have unearthed various coins, including British shillings, Spanish dollars, and later U.S. currency, in slave quarters. This evidence challenges the myth that enslaved people had no access to money. Thomas Jefferson, known for his meticulous record-keeping, documented the payments made to enslaved artisans at Monticello, particularly those who worked in his nailery. He would weigh the iron rods given to each worker in the morning, and then weigh the nails produced the following day. Those who exceeded expectations received a small bonus, which he called a gratuity. The daily grind. From dawn to dusk, the typical workday for enslaved people in the fields was long and arduous, stretching from sunrise to sunset. They would rise before dawn, eat a meager breakfast of cornmeal mush or hoe cakes, often eaten cold in the summer months to avoid heating up their cramped cabins, and then head out to their assigned tasks. The majority of enslaved people worked in the fields under the supervision of a gang leader who was also enslaved. and the watchful eye of a white overseer. Their second meal wouldn't come until mid-afternoon, and they often carried a portion of their breakfast with them to eat when they could snatch a moment away from the overseer's scrutiny. Resistance, finding ways to fight back. Despite the brutal conditions, enslaved people found ways to resist their oppression. While not all forms of resistance were overt, many enslaved individuals, particularly those working in the fields, engaged in subtle acts of defiance. This could include working slowly, feigning illness, or breaking tools. Those in positions where their output was closely monitored risked harsh punishment if they failed to meet their quotas, but they still found ways to express their agency and challenge the system that sought to control every aspect of their lives. Artisans, house servants, and others who held higher positions within the plantation hierarchy were often less likely to participate in organized resistance due to their proximity to enslavers and the potential for harsher consequences. However, it's important to recognize that resistance took many forms, from everyday acts of defiance to planned rebellions. The desire for freedom and the refusal to be completely subjugated burned within the hearts of enslaved people, shaping their experiences and leaving a lasting legacy of courage and resilience. Number 6, the essential role of skilled labor, coopers, and textile production. As the economic landscape of Virginia shifted, so did the demands placed upon enslaved labor. When tobacco markets declined, many large plantations transitioned to growing wheat and other grains. This change brought about a need for grist mills, powered by nearby streams, to process the grain into flour for shipment to market. This shift also led to a surge in demand for skilled coopers, the artisans responsible for crafting barrels, casks, and other containers. These containers were essential for transporting a wide array of plantation products, including flour, cornmeal, beer, whiskey, nails, and even salted meat and fish. The coopers' expertise was crucial to the plantation economy. They transformed raw materials into sturdy, watertight containers that protected goods during transport, ensuring their safe arrival at market. Enslaved coopers were highly valued for their skills and played a vital role in maintaining the flow of commerce, from field to fabric, textile production at Monticello. While cotton production boomed in the Deep South after the invention of the cotton gin in 1793, Virginia remained primarily focused on other crops. However, some plantations, including Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, did cultivate cotton in smaller quantities. Jefferson also raised sheep and grew industrial hemp, providing the raw materials for textile production. He envisioned a degree of self-sufficiency at Monticello, aiming to produce clothing for the enslaved people who labored on his plantation. In the early 1800s, Jefferson converted a building previously used as living quarters for house servants into a textile workshop. Here, enslaved individuals were tasked with spinning, weaving, carding, and preparing hemp fibers, cotton, and wool into cloth. Jefferson invested in specialized machinery for this purpose, demonstrating his understanding of the importance of textile production. The work of these enslaved textile workers was essential to clothing the plantation community. Their skilled hands transformed raw fibers into usable fabric, demonstrating their adaptability and the diverse range of labor demanded of them under the brutal system of slavery. Number 7. Enslaved blacksmiths, the master craftsmen of the plantation. Among the most skilled and respected enslaved laborers were the blacksmiths. Their expertise was vital to the day-to-day functioning of every plantation. Blacksmiths repaired tools, sharpened plowshares, fashioned nails, and produced countless iron goods necessary for both agricultural and domestic use. An enslaved blacksmith's workshop was often located near the overseer's house or close to the main work areas. The rhythmic ringing of hammer against anvil was a familiar sound across Virginia plantations. Blacksmiths, along with carpenters, wheelwrights, and coopers, formed the backbone of plantation industry. These skilled laborers were often given a degree of autonomy in their work. They managed their own tools, sometimes trained apprentices, and occasionally even worked for hire, with a portion of their earnings going to the enslaver. Their skill gave them a measure of prestige within the enslaved community, though they were still denied freedom and subjected to the same brutal system of control. The enslaved blacksmith's forge symbolized both craftsmanship and captivity, a place where mastery of fire and metal coexisted with the unyielding chains of bondage. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe, share You Remember with a friend, and explore more amazing videos in this series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.